Hello, my name is Max Banfield. Welcome to my talk. If you're a young person interested in science and solving the problems of the world, that's a good thing to do. But not everybody thinks like you. Some people go into this world and their intention is to lie, cheat and steal and pretend that they're highly ethical people of integrity and to exploit everything you do. And they're going to think that you're suckers. And they'll get the benefits of what you do. So I'd like you to consider that and then listen to what I have to say. It may save you from a lot of problems in the future. I'm going to discuss 8 things that were considered to be impossible when I started this approach to things, and I'll be discussing 8 things that have happened since. Now, the first thing was that I was offered 3 scholarships to study leadership in gymnastics in a course called Group Work at the Institute of Technology. And so I didn't expect to be studying group psychology, but that's what the course was all about. And the head lecturer was Irene Holloway, who later got a degree in psychology and became Dr. Irene Holloway. And she said that many things. Well, one of the things she said is there's no scientific proof of anything in psychology. Now, what she meant is this. You can't talk to a person and get a typed printout of their thoughts coming out of their mouth. You have to estimate what they're thinking, what may be causing their problems. So there isn't any scientific proof. And one of the situations is this. If somebody's got pain and there's nothing on an x-ray, they're likely to say there's a psychological cause because it can't be physical and not because they know precisely what's going on. It's an estimate, a sort of a calculation not necessarily correct. And you need to understand that. Right? Now, so, in other words, it's impossible to know exactly what's going on in a person's mind. And all ideas of that nature are speculative. The second impossibility is this. As I went through life, in my teenage years, I would experience chest pains that didn't show up on x-rays. Right? And in my early 20s, I'd be counting coins on a desk in the piles of 20. And I'd get kidney aches in my left kidney about, say, 10 o'clock in the morning. And by 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd get aches in both kidneys. So I went to a doctor and there's nothing on x-rays. And so they didn't know the cause. And there was no stress in calculating number of coins in a pile. And boredom isn't stressful either. That's just nonsense. It's simply the fact that I was leaning towards a desk and getting kidney aches. Now, the next thing is that I'd start getting abdominal pains. And then I'd start getting breathless and faintness and fatigue and all sorts of things. And I thought I'd be going to a doctor once every 6 months and then once every 3 months and then once every 2 months. In the end, I was in so much pain. I said, I'm not going to go see a doctor because all I'm going to get is an x-ray, a blood test, and he'll say he doesn't know what's wrong. He'll shrug his shoulders and say, did the pill I gave you last time work? And I'd say, no. And he'd give me another one, different colour, different whatever. And so I then thought, I'm going to have to study this myself. Because these problems have been around for 2,000 years. I don't want wait another 2,000 years for them to be solved. I'll be dead. Right? Even if I was healthy, I don't live another 50. And the way I'm going, I'm not going to last very long. So I decided to take a month off work, annual leave, and still crook. And then I took a year with leave without pay, and I still crook. And so I find myself being referred to a psychiatrist. And he said, what does the doctor say is wrong with you? And I said, well, he can't find anything on an X-ray or blood test. And then he sort of got a bit arrogant and said, well, therefore your problems are psychological. Tell me about your childhood. And I thought, why is he leaping to the conclusion that these problems are psychological? Well, there's no scientific proof of any of that stuff. And then I was referred to a psychologist. And he said he had 5 psychology degrees from 5 universities in 3 different countries. And he had scientific proof that my problems were mental and not physical. And I knew there was no scientific proof of anything. So I said to him, what person discovered that? He said, God, somebody overseas. I said, what country? He said, Europe. I said, can you give me the name of the person, the name of a research journal, the time and the date of publication so that I can go and check it? And of course he couldn't. I thought, I'm in real trouble. I'm not going to get anywhere here. So essentially, the only way I was going to get out of this was to resign without pay and start studying myself. Okay, he said it's impossible for there to be a physical cause. Right? Now, the third impossibility. I was told that all of these problems were impossible, but over the next 5 years, I came to the conclusion that it was probably bad posture was compressing my chest to cause the chest pain when I was a kid. And then I noticed that I was getting faintness and breathlessness when I was leaning towards the washing machine or whatever. And I noticed that I was getting abdominal pain when I bent down to tie up my shoelaces. But not every time. And that was confusing until I realised there's a consistency here somewhere. And so I wrote this theory after 5 years, and it's really difficult to see the relationship, which is why everyone was rejecting it, that leaning forward towards the desk was compressing my chest to cause chest pain, my abdomen to cause abdominal pain, my lungs to cause breathing problems, and my kidneys to cause kidney problems, etc. It's pretty obvious to me that was correct. But I was told that is impossible by various people. Now, impossibility number 3, right? I was told that it's impossible for that to happen. Because I was doing research and was not able to attend university full-time, I was told it's illegal to attend university unless you're a full-time student. It's illegal to go to an autopsy study and look at dead bodies unless you was a formal student. So it's impossible for me to go to university. And then I was introduced by another researcher to Professor Tim Morrell. Now, Tim Morrell was the head of the Adelaide University Medical School. He was also the head of the State Government Department of Community Medicine. And he had a very large office in the Royal Adelaide Hospital on North Terrace. And he got that promotion to that job because he'd formerly been involved in research into pig tail virus in Papua New Guinea. And when I discussed this and several other theories with him, he said he admired my intellectual initiative. He also said he was envious. And he said that what I was saying was impossible. I said, why? And he said, because look at wrestlers, for example. They crush each other's chests. They give each other bear hugs. They crush each other's chests and they squirm in great strength, try to crush each other into winning the wrestling match. And they're very strong men. They get up, as soon as they do, everything returns to its normal position and so forth. And he says, all you do when you're sitting at a desk in an office is lifting a biro. It's as light as a feather. It's not possible for that to be because of health problems. Wrestlers don't get those health problems. Only office workers do. Now, I couldn't counteract him at that time. I can now. Very easy to counteract that argument. At that time, I couldn't. I'll now move on to impossibility number 4. When I was studying various things, and this is related to what I was doing, I ran some public meetings to see if I could get other groups of patients or members of the public to support me. because I wasn't getting that much support from the universities. And at one stage, patients were all too worried to they didn't think they could assist. So I advertised for people with maybe some type of education. And one of the people, about 30 people who attended the talk, was a history lecturer from Adelaide University. And after the meeting, as they're all walking past, I managed to stop him and say, "Will you be considering assisting me in doing this research?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I was wasting my time. I should do something else useful with my life instead of this, what I was doing." And he said, "There's no physical basis for these problems, and what I should do is leave it up to the experts." Right? Now, I wasn't going to... These problems have been around for 2,000 years. No one will be able to solve them. I wasn't going to wait 2,000 years for someone else to do it, right? So I decided I'd just keep going without anybody. Nobody wanted to assist me, right? So, impossibility number 5, right? During this process, even though I knew the cause, I was like a lot better off than most people. I was still getting problems with a lot of pain, and sometimes it lasts for weeks or months at a time. And even though I had a basic understanding of the problem, I couldn't really pinpoint what was really going on. And so I was referred to a gastroenterologist. This is a medical specialist who specialises in abdominal disorders. And he wrote a letter to my GP, and I read it. And this is what he said. Something like this. This gentleman appears to be very intelligent, with a keen interest in solving these problems, but there is no physical basis for the problem, and he would be much better advised to study the mind and how psychological factors influence these things, and if he solved any of these problems, then his pain would just disappear. So I didn't take that seriously because I knew there's no psychological proof of that stuff. He apparently believed it, and I was finding a lot of evidence and personal experience. This pain was real, right? So I'll now go on to impossibility number 6. There was times when the problem with this pain was it would sometimes last a day, a week, or months. And it was sometimes mild and sometimes severe. And so I would say, I'm not going to see a doctor. They can't see nothing on x-ray, nothing on blood test or anything like that. And one day the pain was so bad, I arranged to see an abdominal surgeon. And I said to him, "I want you to cut my belly open from top to bottom and have a look in. Open me up and have a look in." And he said he couldn't do that for ethical reasons. I said, "Why not?" And he said that millions of people around the world have the pain that I've got. And tens of thousands have had their bellies cut open and nobody's found anything. He said it's a waste of time, and the operation runs its risk. It could kill you. Now, I have to say things like this, right, to make it clear. I wasn't depressed. I wasn't worried. But if you're in pain, a lot of people think, well, the only way to end the pain is, commit suicide. You're not in pain when you're dead. So I said to him, "Look, if you don't operate on me, I'll commit suicide." And so he said, "All right, I'll do it." And when I woke up from the operation, there's a scar about 10 centimetres long in my belly. And I said, "Did you find anything?" He said, "No." And he wasn't rude about it. He just walked away. It's pretty clear. He was convinced there's nothing physically to be found. It's impossible to find anything, right? So I will now go on to impossibility number 7. And that was where, as I mentioned, I'll talk about a bit of introduction, then I'll tell you what was impossible. I had started writing a book on health for reasons which I won't go into, but because I was sitting at a desk, it was a very painful process. I'd be in pain after 10 minutes. And then I'd stop and do something in the afternoon. So I spent most of my time thinking, not much time writing. And I'd added a 6-inch high bent platform to the top of my desk. But standing and sitting up straight, they helped a little bit, but weren't solving the problem. And so one day I added another 6-inch platform on top of that. So I couldn't sit at a desk anymore up like this. I had to actually stand to use it. And because I was writing a book and because I couldn't afford a typist, I purchased a computer. This is one of the first around in the general public. They'd been available in some organisations, but not really used by the general public. And I wanted to learn to type. Why? Because if I wrote, my writing speed was 20 words a minute. If I typed, I could get it up to 60 words a minute reasonably easy. And some people had typing speeds of 120 words a minute. So obviously, if I'm going to do it right, I might as well write by typing, and I got 3 times as much done for the same amount of pain, basically. So it was better for me to learn to type than to keep writing. And then one day, I was adding angled platforms to the top of my desk, and I was standing and moving about and doing all sorts of things. And I didn't even know I'd solved this problem. But then one day, I got up at 7 o'clock in the morning and I started thinking about solving this problem, and then I started typing. And then 4 hours later, it's about 11 o'clock, and I thought, bloody hell, I'm going to be a rich man. I've just solved a problem. I've been typing for 4 hours without pain. This has never ever happened before. What's going on here? So what I did was I looked at my desk, the height, the position of my arms, the position of my elbows. I've been studying all these things for a long time. And the position of my eyes and the distances and so forth. Now, I'm not going to go into any more detail, but I knew precisely by the time I finished what that was. And I kept the desk in that position. And I really haven't had a lot of trouble since, until maybe 15 or so years later. I started getting slightly different problems. But that design is what took the right amount of pressure in the right way off my chest and abdomen. And so I went and I discussed this with the newspapers. I said, I've got a brilliant new idea, but I knew someone's going to steal this idea if I don't get it secured. So I waited until I could get my next edition of my book published. It was about the 8th edition. No, it was about the 10th edition, right? And it took somewhere between 6 months and a year for me before I could get it published, with my name on it, copyright, all rights reserved. And then I went rushing off to the newspapers and I said, I've got this brilliant new idea. It will help millions of people. And they said, no, have you? Well, we're not interested unless you can get the support of the universities. So I went to the universities and I even wanted to donate one of my books to the library because I didn't want to buy it, and they didn't want it. I think I might have left one behind. I don't know what they did with it. But they didn't pay for it. And they might not have, they might have thrown it in the bin because they weren't keen on what I was saying. So I then went to the furniture companies, and the bosses of those companies were typing with one finger, or they were dictating to secretaries, or they're running step-down sometimes jump shops, trip over things. And they said they never had any standing desks, nobody ever wanted them. and no one was interested. No, they weren't. But they were very polite, friendly people. But they said, look, we're not interested. But there's another guy down the road with a furniture shop. You go down there and good luck. That was what they said. They weren't interested. The newspapers, the universities, and the furniture companies, the main ones, were not interested. Right? So that's that's the situation. But in the meantime, impossibility number 8. I was going to the Skeptics Club. They met in a hotel in Adelaide. Maybe seemed to me like, 50 to 100 people. And they were people who were sceptical of people like water diviners and people who said there's UFOs flying around in the sky and people who said they could tell the future with tea leaves and crystal balls and things. But they only focused on scientific methods. And the vice president was Laurie Eddy. So I went up to him and I said, would you like to review my book? And because he was a psychologist, I thought he might give a biased view. But if he's scientifically objective, he'll say something objective. But he didn't. And he didn't publish. And then and I had a standing desk as a front diagram of that book, but he didn't publish until after I invented the standing computer desk, right, a year or so later. And then he published it. The review went in the Skeptic magazine, in the autumn of the year 2000. And he said, basically, there's thousands of possible causes of illness, from, the Industrial Revolution and the smog in the skies and the contamination in the water that we drink and chemicals in the environment and climate. And he said, there's too many possibilities for anyone to know about this for 500 years. Too complicated. It's probably mental, not physical. And you can't get sick sitting in a chair. And so he said it's probably psychological. So he said it's impossible for just sitting in a chair to be illness, to be sick, and he wouldn't accept that standing was the solution. So those are the 8 impossibilities. So what's happened since? Well, first of all, I stopped writing the book. Basically, it's 1,000 pages. It's costing me $65 to make each, and that's all I could get for it. And there was no particular interest in it. It wasn't taking off. It wasn't getting popular or anything. And I started doing other things. Right? Now, so what's happened since? Well, I'll go on. There are a few minor things happened in the meantime. But 15 years later is where event number 1 happened. In this, what I'm telling you now, event number 1, right? I was in the shopping centre and a fella come up to me and he said, hello, Max, do you know me? Remember me? And I said, no. He said his name was Bob Gregory. I said, yeah, I know you. He's the local member of Parliament. I'd spoken to him on numerous occasions in the 1980s and early 1990s, right? He had his parliamentary office just across the road from the shopping centre where I live, behind a fish and chip shop, that sort of thing. And I'd been discussing how sitting at a desk was making people sick, how I wanted to get this idea into school so kids would grow up healthy, and how the newspapers and everyone was rejecting the idea. What can you do to assist me? He said, he can't do anything. And I said, why not? You're a politician, a community leader. And he said, because he got into politics by supporting the wharfies down at Port Adelaide, and they're sort of like manual labourers. They're not intellectuals. He didn't know anything about medicine. Well, that's how I met Bob Gregory 20 years earlier. And he comes up to me in the shopping centre 15 years after I invented that desk, and he said, did you know there's an article in the newspaper about your theory? And I said, no, nobody's ever asked my permission to write about it. And so I said, I'll go buy the paper. So I bought it. And I've just forgotten to say something, so I'll just say it now. It's a very complicated sequence of events. Between 2013 and 2014, I had about 35 essays published in the British Medical Journal. And I was basically summarising the things I thought. And I was a bit surprised that a medical journal published stuff from a non-medic, right? And it included all of my theories. And so what the article in the Advertiser said in 2015, a panel of international experts has issued the world's first guidelines on how long to sit, stand and move and use standing desks throughout the days. And I thought, those thieving galahs, right? Why are stealing from me? I'm the guy who said that, but they didn't say they'd issued the world's first guidelines. They said they'd issued the world's first specific guidelines. Presumably because they could say, well, we've done something better, like sit 2 hours, stand 2 hours and move 2 hours. That is a load of silly nonsense, right? I said move, sit, stand and use standing desks, and they had done nothing, said nothing new. And one of the scientists in the building, it's a $300 million building, a new one, they'd installed standing desk in it before their scientists moved into it. And so one of the scientists said she'd been using standing desks for a while and didn't think much of them for a while, but, you know, they're amazingly beneficial to the way you do things. So it's a brand new discovery to one of their scientists, right? One of their science staff. And this is a brand new concept they're talking about. And it was my theory. And Bob Gregory knew it, right? So I went back to him and I said, what are you going to do about it? This is my theory. He said, what can I? No, I don't think I went back to him straight away. But I did eventually see him and ask that question. So I now move on to event number. So that's Bob Gregory, event number 2. This is event number 3. I was on the internet trying to figure out where people, who got this idea from me. And I found out that James Levine of the Mayo Clinic, one of America's top medical clinics, said he'd been working with his colleagues for 20 years, his colleagues in ergonomics, and several other groups of people were involved, and they said sitting is a health hazard. They discovered it from all their research. Well, that's the exact copy of mine. And the diagram I wrote in 1980, right? The next this event is event number 4. And in 2016, a Quora website said something like this, that one of their reporters went to a furniture manufacturing trade fair about 4 years earlier, and he didn't see any standing desks, or he might have seen half a dozen. And then 3 years ago, there were about 25 companies had standing desks on offer. And he said the previous year, every furniture company in the entire trade fair, over 100 of them, had their version of standing desks. And they were all claiming they got the idea from Leonardo da Vinci, who lived 500 years ago. Well, that means they're trying to figure out how to use my design without paying me copyright, right? So I'll now go on to event number 5. And this is Veridesk, calling themselves a world-leading authority on the new sit-stand desk revolution. Well, obviously, I am. And they're a furniture company who are selling it, and they're making $2 billion worth of sales of standing desks and desktops every year. It's my design, my idea, because if they did it any other way, it'd have no financial or any other value. So I'll now go on to event number 6. And in 2019, a website called OpenPR that advises people on the stock market, that type of thing, big companies, that the standing desk industry is now worth $6.2 billion per annum. And I knew that when I invented 1998, I knew that had happened if somebody woke up to this, how good it was. And it said sales were increasing and they were predicting how many would be being made up until 2025. Now, event number 7. I didn't know this had happened. But somewhere in the meantime, the Australian government had passed occupational health and safety laws to reimburse the fees of doctors and physios who prescribe standing desks for office workers who need them for health reasons. Right? They had never done that before. And they were doing it because they'd seen my theories or got first or second-hand information about my research and what I discovered. And they want to save money on healthcare costs to reduce the national budget by billions so they can say there's now a surplus and they vote for them, sort of thing. And for whatever reason, they weren't telling me. But Bob Gregory knew I invented that desk. He's probably retired from politics by then, but there are other politicians who knew. So what's going on now? Let's call that event number 8. Newspapers, lawyers and politicians say, forget about the past and get on with the future. They'll protect my ideas if I come up with any new ones. I don't want to say any more about that. I'll end my talk there. This is what I want you to know if you're a 16-year-old science student or a newly qualified graduate in science. I wasn't a scientist, but I was using scientific methods, no matter what anybody else tells you. You've got to protect yourself from people who come along later and want you to think they did the research and that they deserve the profit and that they don't have to give you anything. So bear that in mind, and I hope you find it useful. Maybe you'll look after my rights to protect your rights in the future, to set an example. Thank you for watching.